So recently, I made a ranking for every single Terraria boss, which you should totally go watch. And it got a really good amount of views, along with a lot of comments, some of them being hate comments, which I expected because this is a ranking after all, and some people are entitled to their own opinion, though overall most people like the ranking. But I thought it'd be cool if I made a Calamity boss ranking. Just know that this ranking is not my opinion and these are pure facts because obviously I'm the best Terraria player. Anyway, let's begin. So starting off with the bad bosses, the bosses I hate, the bosses I want out of the game. Number 26, Astram Marius. Now, do I really think he's the worst boss in the game? No, not really, but I just have trauma from this boss. On my first ever Calamity Revengeance playthrough, before my channel even began, I played through the mod and eventually got to Astram Marius. Now, is Astram Marius a difficult boss? No, but did I just suck at fighting it? Yup. I kid you not, this boss took me more attempts for me to beat than the Devourer of Gods in that same playthrough. Like, how the hell does that work? It wasn't even hard, I'm just horrible at fighting it. Not only am I putting this boss at last for this horrible memory I have, but also, I just have a running joke on this channel where I hate on Astram Marius for no reason. I want to keep the running joke, which is why I want to put this boss at last. Now, let's move on to the actual ranking because I honestly consider this one a joke. Number 25. The real worst boss in the game, Old Duke. What is the Old Duke? Take Duke Fishron, make it drunk, give it a shotgun, give it weed, meth, steroids, every single drug you can think of, legal or not. That is Old Duke. Like, I hate every single thing about this boss. It's a culmination of every single thing I hate about Calamity. Before we get to the bad though, let me start with the only good thing it has, a banger theme. But the thing is, that really isn't a high bar to pass, since every Calamity song is banger worthy. There's not one bad Calamity song. I mean, I might be glazing a little, but come on. Name one bad Calamity song in the comments. I dare you. Now, moving on to the bad things about the boss, which is literally everything else. The way you summon this thing is horrible. Like, almost every other Calamity boss can just be summoned using a non-consumable item. Easy, right? But oh no, for the Old Duke, you gotta find bloodworms under the Sulphur Sea, and they're pretty annoying to find. This wouldn't be so bad if the boss wasn't a dumpster fire to fight, and every time you die, you have to get another bloodworm over and over and over again. But why is the fight horrible? First off, the way he predicts your dashes makes me want to take 27 shots and drive into a tree. Also, the random projectiles that come from nowhere near the boss itself and the outside of the screen is just... Now, let's say I was a Calamity developer. I know jack about making mods, but this is hypothetical. What would I change about the Old Duke? Maybe change the AI a little? Maybe change the way it's summoned? Or rework the entire fight? What I would do is just remove the entire boss completely. The Old Duke serves nothing to the Calamity mod. I guarantee you, if he was just completely removed from the game, nothing would change. The concept of the boss itself is just bad. Like, we got the God of the Sun, an entity that can devour gods and galaxies, a master creator that can create divine mechanical beings, and we got a boomer fish. Just remove this boss. Number 24, the Ravager. Even though it's one of the worst bosses on this list, at least it's still nothing compared to the dumpster fire that is Old Duke. The Ravager just sucks. It's mainly just the way the fight is designed. It kind of just seems like a golem that's a little more expanded. The way it stomps, the walls that spawn, all that. Also, the fact that the fight gets easier as time goes on is pathetic. Like, look at the last phase of the fight. Yeah, that's how pathetic it is. But unlike the Old Duke, not everything about it is complete garbage. You got the Infernal Blood that drops in Revengeance, and the Bloodstone that drops post-Providence. Necromantic Geodes are also somewhat useful, but it's easier to mine the actual ores than grind the Ravager for them. Anyway, what would I do to the Ravager? Honestly, just give it a rework, or at least give it some major changes. Number 23, Hivemind. I have no clue where to put this boss, because I never fight it. I choose Crimson 99% of the time. So do I care about it? Not really. So instead, you're gonna do my job for me. Tell me in the comments, is the Hivemind good? Is it bad? Is it worse than Old Duke? I doubt it, but leave your answer below. Moving on. Number 22, the Storm Reaver. The Storm Reaver is just BS. First off, it's a worm boss, and I have a hatred for Calamity worm bosses because they take the damage of a hydrothermic bomb. But that's besides the point. Another reason I hate this is because it can get way too unfair. Like, let's look at the way this boss behaves. First phase, easy. Just hit the tail and circle around and the thunder won't hit you. The second phase is when it gets annoying. You know how I can turn blue and summon Zeus to smite you out of the sky? Well, most of the time, I have no clue where the lightning comes from. Is it coming from the left? Is it coming from the right? Is it coming from France? Who knows? But that's not all. That's not even the worst part. You wanna know what the worst part is? Well, if you get further into the fight, the Storm Reaver is gonna start spawning clouds that move down and hit you. It's an easy attack. If it wasn't spawning them while spawning the lightning. Sometimes you can get these moments where it spawns the clouds and the lightning at the exact same time, which makes it basically impossible to dodge. It's just cheap, and it's probably the only way the boss will hit you because the rest of the fight is just pathetic. Anyway, moving on. Number 21, the Aquatic Scourge. The Aquatic Scourge is kind of just unfun. It's a worm boss, so it gets completely annihilated. I really just don't find this boss fun to fight. And the worst part is, I don't know why. It just isn't fun. So, moving on. Number 20. Cygnus. There really isn't much to talk about Cygnus. Cygnus is just Cygnus. Nothing special about him. He's pretty cool, I guess. The fight really isn't all that exciting. Moving on. At this point, we're mostly done with the bad rankings. From here on out, it's really nothing but bosses I feel positive about. Let's get into number 19, Cryogen. Honestly, Cryogen is a pretty cool boss. Get it? Cryogen, cool because it's cold. Yeah. It's pretty fun to fight, but it's usually really annoying to fight in daytime, since it's way harder to see its projectiles since the sun is blinding the very thing that is my eyes. Though that gets fixed in nighttime. Also, another thing I don't like, the amount of damage reduction it has. Seriously, I don't know if it just has the health of a tank or its damage reduction is way too high, but a lot of the time, this thing takes way too long to kill. Other than those things, it's a good boss. The theme is very cool and it fits the boss perfectly. The loot is good, especially my beloved true melee weapon, the Avalanche, also known as the Destroyer Killer because it can kill the Destroyer in like 15 seconds. Oh wait, it got nerfed against it. Well, guess it's now 30 seconds. Still OP. Anyway, moving on. Number 18, the Dragon Folly. The Dragon Folly is a pretty good one, also not that big of a boss. You know, I would put the Dragon Folly way higher up on the list if its name was still Bumbleburb. Like, why did they have to rename it? The name was perfect. The sprite was also cute. But anyway, it's overall just a fun fight, not that hard. In fact, it's pretty easy. But it isn't supposed to be hard. After all, it's the first boss you fight in the post-Moonlord segment of the game, and it serves as a good warm-up for the harder bosses to come. You know what? I should start a petition to resprite the Dragon Folly back to Bumbleburb. Yeah, you know what? I'll start one. Sign right here, boys. Come on. Anyway, one day the boss will be back to its former glory. Let's move on. Number 17, Anahita and the Leviathan. First off, Anahita. But second, what I like about Anahita and the Leviathan is how it forces you to focus. There are a lot of projectiles on screen, sure, but it's reactable and dodgeable, and even though there are a lot of projectiles, you know what's happening. You know what to dodge. Though sometimes it can get a little too much when both of them are on screen. Also, the one thing I really don't like is the way you summon the boss. Rather than being able to just use a normal non-consumable, you gotta find the question mark NPC. And I don't know why, maybe it's just my luck, but sometimes it takes me 43 years just to find the NPC to summon the boss. Though I don't think it's nearly as bad as the Old Duke summon, since you're probably not gonna have to spend as many attempts on the Leviathan than on the Old Duke. But yeah, Leviathan, good boss. Number 16, the Perforators. The Perforators are just, like, what the hell do I even say about this fight? I don't know what to say. It's cool, but like, there's nothing really notable. You know what? Cut this out. Cut this out. Number 15, the Profane Guardians. I remember a long time ago when the Guardians really just sucked. They were a horrible boss to fight, and I think most, if not everyone, hated them. But taking a look at update 2.02, they got reworked into a much better fight. I really love how the Guardians use attacks that are similar, if not straight up identical to Providence. And it allows you to somewhat have an idea of how to dodge Providence's attacks when the time comes. And the different attack patterns you have to memorize and dodge for each Guardian makes this fight a good one. The resport the Guardians got is also much better than the old one. Before, they used to just look like meatballs. Now they got wings, they look cooler, and now they look like actual Guardians, instead of meatballs that you can eat. Though at the same time, there really isn't anything else too special about the Guardians, so moving on. Number 14, Polter Gast. Polter Gast is just cool. Whenever I look at Polter Gast, I go, hell yeah. Polter Gast is like Anahita and the Leviathan. You need to have your focus on the fight at all times, which gives me a sort of adrenaline boost. Not Calamity adrenaline, real life adrenaline. The focus is especially needed when the duplicate spawns. Anytime your focus flavors, you're going to get hit. I've seen some people say that this boss is a carbon copy of Plantera. The sprite similarities, the way it chases you, the way it hooks around, and while I somewhat agree they're similar, I also think there are a lot of differences, like the attacks and such. Anyway, moving on to the next boss. Alright, this might be a bit controversial. Number 13, the Exomax. So, why am I putting the Exomax as number 13, even though it's one of the 2 final bosses? Well, let's see. The Exomax suit, amazing. The lore, really cool. The way you summon it, also pretty cool and in-depth. So, why is it this low on the list? The fight is complete projectile hell. Most of the time, I have no clue what the hell is even on my screen. Like, look at this! What's happening? You know my first ever Calamity playthrough? The one I mentioned when talking about Astram Marius? Well, on that same exact playthrough, you wanna know how I beat the Exomax? On Revengeance? I just moved up and down, with no clue what the hell I was even doing, and what was even happening. It took me around 40 attempts, but I just fought it with no semblance of strategy or thinking. It's why I like Infernum Exomax way more. You actually know what's happening, and it isn't just a complete screen health. It's the reason why on my Calamity no-hit playthrough, this was the worst boss in the playthrough. Was it the hardest? No. Supreme Calamus was the hardest and it took the most attempts. So why was it the worst? Because it was the most unfun to fight. It took me like 400 attempts and the only reason I was dying was because of stray projectiles from the sun. This fight has a lot of potential to be even in the top 5, but I just wish they could reduce the projectile spam. Moving on. Number 12, the Brimstone Elemental. I now have PTSD from this boss because, well, for this video, I'm googling every boss to know what I should talk about. And when I googled the Brimstone Elemental, don't go on the images tab. Seriously though, the Brimstone Elemental is a cool, fire boss. The laser attacks are pretty fun to dodge, and I like the part when she goes into her shell and shoots from every direction. The theme is lovely because DM Dokuro is a crackhead at making every single Calamity theme a masterpiece for no reason, but what sets me on liking this boss is the lore. I can't help but feel bad for the Brimstone Elemental. She lost everything because of Calamus, now laying dormant in the underworld, and all we can do is come in and end her misery. It really does suck to be her. Number 11, the Desert Scourge. First off, gotta get this out of the way, it's a worm boss and I hate worm bosses. But at the same time, the Desert Scourge is still pretty cool. It's the first boss in the Calamity mod, and the worm boss effect isn't as bad, since not as many weapons are available in the early game that can pierce infinitely and shred this boss. Also, the fact that it's the first boss in the Calamity mod makes it an iconic boss. Not as iconic as a certain other worm boss that I'll get into later, but still pretty iconic. The thing about the Desert Scourge is that if you're actually somewhat decent at the game and you have good mobility, the Desert Scourge is pretty pathetic in terms of difficulty. But it is the first Calamity boss you come across, so it makes sense, and I like that about the Scourge. I just find it much better and more fun than the Aquatic Scourge. Anyway, Desert Scourge, a very solid first boss of the playthrough. Let's move on. Numero 10. The Ceaseless Void. The Ceaseless Void is my favorite out of the 3 Sentinels. I honestly find it satisfying when I get to ram through all of the balls that it spawns. Are they balls? Black holes? Black balls? That sounds wrong. I especially like the last phase of the fight before the void dies. God damn it. When it tries to pull you in and shoot a ton of projectiles on the screen. It's a nice desperation attack to add, and one of the only actual desperation attacks in the Calamity mod. Maybe even the only. I haven't checked. And frankly, I'm too lazy to check. Let's move on. Number 9, Crabulon. Crabulon is like the Polter Gast. Whenever I look at Crabulon, it gives me the motivation to do more with my life and not quit. Why? I have no clue on this earth. It's just so cool. A glowing mushroom crab with a banger techno theme? What's not to love about it? It makes me really want to go to the gym and hit bench presses, squats, and deadlifts all at the same time. Now talking about the fight itself, it's fun. You gotta make sure to dodge the jumps, the 500 mushrooms that come at you every second, all that. It's pretty fun. Other than that, there really isn't much to say about Crabulon. It's just cool. Moving on. Number 8, Astramdas. I just love the vibe of Astramdas. First off though, it loses points because it's a worm boss, therefore it can get destroyed. But aside from that fact, I just love how unique the boss is. It starts out as one giant worm, and as it gets slower, it splits into two, making the fight much harder. It's a unique structure for a fight, and a good one at that. The Astramdas theme is also one of my favorites, maybe even my favorite theme in the entire mod. Like, it's just such a good vibe. Well, actually let me change that rating. It's my second favorite theme in the game. You'll find my favorite soon enough. Number 7, the Slime God. Every time I fight the Slime God, I have both a seizure and paralysis at the same time. Why? Because of how good this theme is. The Slime God is an amazing boss, and it's also home to one of my favorite progression skips in the game. If you're actually good at the game, you can fight the Slime God before beating any other boss in pre-hard mode, get stat gel gear, and destroy everything else in pre-hard mode. Only do this skip if you're good at the game. Like me. Because I'm the best Calamity player. Obviously. Usually with duo bosses like the twins, Astramdas, Polter Gast, and such, you have to focus much harder since there are two entities to focus on, which is one of the big reasons I like this boss. It gives me that adrenaline boost. Slime God is amazing. Moving on to number 6. Number 6, Providence. Providence is just awesome. Like, really awesome. First off, she is literally the god of the sun itself. How cool is that? As for the boss fight itself, for some reason, you know this sparkle attack? That attack where she shoots these sparkle projectiles from every direction? I have no clue why, but I love this attack so much. Oh, and the part where she summons the guardians is also really damn cool. Though it is also funny when I forget that it's nighttime, and then I summon Providence. It happens at least once every Calamity playthrough. Don't lie, it has probably also happened to you. I should try beating nighttime Providence at least once. Providence also has some cool lore. If you don't know, she wants to purify everything, and by that, she means killing literally everything. If you watch Dragon Ball Super, it's like Goku Black type insane. Providence thinks she's doing the right thing, but really she's just a psychopath. It's kind of ironic. Now, with Providence out of the way, let's move on to the top 5. Number 5, Yuron. Let's go into story time. Remember on my first ever Calamity Revengeance mode playthrough, I went the rogue class and used the Executioner's Blade. If you weren't around back then, the Executioner's Blade was overpowered, straight up broken. He killed Yuron in like 15 seconds. That is not an exaggeration. I didn't know the weapon was broken, so I thought the boss was just really pathetic and easy. Fast forward to my first ever death mode playthrough. This time I was melee, and I was about to fight death mode Yuron. I was like, okay, Yuron got destroyed in my last Calamity playthrough. This is gonna be so easy. And then, I died like 200 times. In fact, I got so frustrated that I straight up deleted the world and quit the playthrough. I'm not kidding. I was just horrible at this game. Yuron is just a glorified Duke Fishron. It's got the dashes, the tornadoes, all that, but it's good. It's fun, and I have a really great time with this boss. Also, the theme of this boss is one of the only 2 boss themes in the game that have lyrics. So, cool. Moving on. Number 4, the Calamus Clone. I just love the Calamus Clone. Like, if you want me to describe how this fight works, take the twins, merge them into one, and put them on Broly boost. That's the Calamus Clone. I really like how the attacks are toned down versions of the Supreme Calamus attacks. After all, it is a clone, so it somewhat prepares you. I find the clone to be one of the more difficult bosses of hard mode, but I really like how fast paced it is. Especially when the siblings spawn, that's when you have to go really fast. I also like dodging the bullet hell phases, and god, the theme. The theme is just perfection. This is my favorite theme in the game. In fact, I find it better than the actual Supreme Calamus theme. Don't hate me for it. The Supreme Calamus theme is good, but this is just on another level. And if you listen closely, you can hear a lot of other Calamity motifs in this theme, like the Perforators, Cryogen, Crabulon, even the Slime God and the Brimstone Elemental. It's really cool. Now, with the Calamus Clone off the list, let's move on to the top 3. Number 3, the Plaguebringer Goliath. I have a lot to say about the Plaguebringer. A lot of good things. The Plaguebringer is just awesome. Look at it for a second. A giant mech bug that can dash around and fire nukes? Like, how is that not cool? I just love how cool this boss is. I have no idea why I find it so cool. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I like eating uranium for breakfast. Who knows? But I really like the plague theme to this fight. It just brings such a unique tone to it. And the fight is so fun. How fast it is, how it shoots missiles, all that. Now you might say, Skeletron, why did you hate the old Duke for being a Duke Fishron copy, but you like the Plaguebringer even though it's a Queen Bee copy? Well, listen up. Look at the old Duke for a second. You see how disgusting it looks? Every time I see this sprite, I want to pull out every strand of my hair one by one. Now, look at the Plaguebringer. Look at how cool this looks. Ulduke is just executed horribly, while the Plaguebringer is such a fun, amazingly executed fight. Whenever I'm about to fight Ulduke, I want to dropkick a metal pipe just so I can break my leg. Which is never because I never fight this boss. Whenever I'm about to fight the Plaguebringer, I get excited because of how fun it is. That's the difference. This boss is also home to one of my favorite themes in the entire game. It just fits the Plague vibe perfectly. Now, this is an amazing boss, but there are just 2 more that beat this for me. Number 2, the Devourer of Gods. You might be asking, Skeletron, why are you putting a worm boss this high on the list? Well, I have other reasons, but also, this is the only worm boss on the entire list that can't be destroyed as easily. Why? Because it only takes damage from the head and tail if you want to go that far. But there's also a lot of damage reduction on the rest of the segments, which makes it hard to completely shred it like other worm bosses. Let's get out of this can of worms though. Get it? Can of worms? I'll stop, don't unsubscribe. One of the biggest reasons I love this boss is how iconic it is. The Devourer is the face of the Calamity mod. In fact, it's so iconic that before I even played Terraria, I knew about the Devourer, which is just insane to think about. It's probably even the most iconic boss in all of modded Terraria, which is not saying much since Calamity unfortunately blitzes every other mod in terms of popularity anyway. I also just like dodging the lasers and grid patterns, though I really want to know how many more reworks and resprites this boss is going to go through. Seriously, it has went through like 15 resprites, and it's going to go through another one soon. Now, let us move on to the final boss on the list. My favorite boss in the game. Number 1, Snidrion. Snidrion is an amazing boss fought in the desert. Okay, I'll stop. Number 1, Supreme Calamus. The final boss being my number 1 boss? No way. But seriously, everything about this boss is just perfect. While the Exomax is just projectile spam, Supreme Calamus actually requires skill, which is what I loved about it. When I completed my 1 HP playthrough, Supreme Calamus was the hardest one to no-hit, taking me over 500 attempts. Come on. I know it's really hard to no-hit this boss, but I don't think it should have taken over 500 attempts. Maybe because I was watching JoJo while trying to no-hit it, or I just suck. Probably both. But did I enjoy those 500 attempts? Surprisingly, yes. I wasn't too frustrated whenever I died, since it was always my fault I got hit. I know comparing a normal Supreme Calamus fight with a no-hit one isn't the best comparison, but it just proves that to not get hit and to not die, you need to be good at the game. The bullet hells, siblings, giant black hole thing, and more. To dodge all those things, you need to learn how to focus. I also really like how she turns into a normal NPC instead of dying when you kill her. The music is also just top notch as usual, and overall, Supreme Calamus is just amazing. I find it as a perfect final boss for the mod. Well, a temporary one. Where's Yuron? Where is he? Give us Yuron. Calamity, please. I hope you enjoyed this ranking. This ranking is completely factual. There are no errors at all and no opinions. Thanks for watching, and see ya.